Before you judge me, I hope you understand the context of this story. My name is Roberto Morales, and I'm 53 years old. I've lived in Los Angeles, California for the past 25 years, ever since I immigrated from El Salvador with my wife Carmen and our infant son Diego. What most people see when they look at me is a middle-aged Latino man pushing a cart full of fresh fruit through the streets of downtown LA, calling out fruta fresca, mangos, piñas, sandías in accented English. What they don't see is the story of how I built a life for my family from nothing, or the pain of watching my own son grow ashamed of the work that made his success possible. The day that changed everything started like any other Wednesday morning in March 2024. I was up at 4 a.m., loading my cart with the fresh fruit I had purchased from the wholesale market the night before. Mangoes from Mexico, pineapples from Costa Rica, watermelons from the Central Valley, each piece carefully selected for ripeness and quality. By 5:30 a.m., I was on the streets, beginning my daily route through the financial district, the university area, and the neighborhoods where office workers and students appreciated fresh, affordable fruit. I had been selling fruit from my cart for 15 years, ever since I lost my job at a textile factory when it moved operations to Mexico. At first, it was supposed to be temporary, just a way to pay the bills while I looked for another factory job. But I discovered that I was good at it. I learned which corners had the most foot traffic, which customers preferred their mangoes, ripe versus firm, how to cut pineapple in perfect spirals that made people stop and buy just to watch the artistry. More importantly, the fruit cart provided steady income during a time when factory jobs were disappearing and age discrimination made it harder for a man in his 40s to find employment. Carmen worked as a housekeeper for several wealthy families in Beverly Hills, and together our modest incomes were enough to rent a small apartment, put food on the table, and save money for Diego's education. Diego was 18 now, a senior at Hamilton High School, and had been accepted to UCLA with a partial scholarship. He was smart, hardworking, and ambitious. Everything Carmen and I had dreamed he would become when we made the difficult decision to leave El Salvador and start over in a new country. But Diego was also increasingly embarrassed by what I did for a living. The first sign of his shame came when he was 15. I had been selling fruit near his school, as I did every weekday around lunchtime, when I saw him walking with a group of friends. I called out to him in Spanish, excited to see him, and offered to give him and his friends some free fruit. Diego's face turned red, and he pretended not to hear me. He steered his friends in a different direction, leaving me standing there with my hand extended, holding perfectly ripe mango slices that suddenly felt heavy in my palm. That evening, when I tried to talk to him about it, Diego exploded with an anger I had never seen before. "Dad, you can't just show up at my school like that," he said, his voice sharp with frustration. "It's embarrassing. My friends don't need to know that my father sells fruit from a cart." "Diego, there's nothing embarrassing about honest work. This fruit cart has helped pay for your clothes, your school supplies, your college applications. I know that. But you don't understand what it's like. When kids at school see you, they make assumptions about our family. They think we're poor, that we're just another immigrant family that can't do any better." "We are an immigrant family," I said quietly, "and there's nothing wrong with that. But we don't have to advertise it. You could get a job inside somewhere, in an office or a store. Something where you don't have to be on the street where everyone can see you." His words stung more than I expected. Carmen, who had been listening from the kitchen, came into the living room with tears in her eyes. "Diego, your father works 12 hours a day to provide for this family," she said. "He takes pride in his work, and he's good at it. You should be proud of him, not ashamed." "I'm not ashamed of Dad," Diego said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I just think he could do better. He's smart enough to do something more professional." Over the next 3 years, as Diego progressed through high school, his embarrassment about my work only grew worse. He stopped bringing friends to our apartment, claiming he preferred to hang out at their houses. When he got a part-time job at a nearby Starbucks, He made a point of telling people that both his parents worked in service without specifying what kind of service. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March when Diego came home from his job at Starbucks looking upset and angry. "What's wrong, mijo?" Carmen asked as Diego threw his backpack on the floor and slumped into a chair at our small kitchen table. "Nothing, just a bad day at work." But I could see there was more to it. "Diego, tell us what happened." "Some kids from school came into Starbucks today. They saw me working there and they started talking about their parents' jobs. One kid's dad is a lawyer, another one's mom is a doctor, and then they asked about my parents." "What did you tell them?" "I told them mom works in hospitality and you work in food service." The way he said food service made it sound like he was trying to make my fruit cart sound more respectable than it was. "And what's wrong with that?" They kept asking questions, and finally one of them said, "Oh, your dad is the guy with the fruit cart. My mom sees him downtown all the time." And then they all started laughing and making jokes about it. Carmen and I exchanged glances. We both knew how cruel teenagers could be, but we also knew that Diego's shame was making the situation worse than it needed to be. "Diego," I said carefully, "what those kids think doesn't matter. What matters is that you know the truth about our family, that we work hard, that we're honest, and that everything we do is so you can have opportunities we never had." "But it does matter," Diego shouted, his voice breaking with emotion. "It matters because I have to live with their jokes and their assumptions. It matters because when I go to UCLA, people are going to ask about my family, and I don't want to have to explain why my dad pushes a fruit cart around the city. So, what do you want me to do? Quit my job? Stop earning money so we can pay for your college? I want you to find something better, something you can be proud of." "I am proud of what I do," I said, my own voice getting louder. "I'm proud that I can support my family with honest work. I'm proud that I've never taken a government handout or asked anyone for charity. I'm proud that this fruit cart is going to help send you to one of the best universities in the country." Diego stood up from the table, his face flushed with anger and frustration. "Well, I'm not proud of it. I'm tired of being the kid whose dad sells fruit on the street corner. I'm tired of making excuses for what you do." The words hung in the air like a slap. Carmen gasped, and I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My own son, the boy I had worked 60-hour weeks to provide for, was ashamed of the sacrifice I had made for his future. "Diego, that's enough," Carmen said, her voice shaking with anger. "You will not speak to your father that way." "Why not? It's the truth. All my friends' parents have real jobs, respectable jobs. And my dad sells fruit from a cart like we're still living in some village in El Salvador." That night, after Diego had stormed off to his room, Carmen and I sat at our kitchen table in stunned silence. The apartment felt smaller than usual, filled with the weight of our son's rejection and disappointment. "Maybe he's right," I said quietly. "Maybe I should try to find something else." "Roberto, don't you dare let that boy make you ashamed of what you do. You've built a good business. You provide for this family. There's honor in that work. But if Diego is embarrassed, Diego is 18 years old, and he's more worried about what his friends think than about the sacrifices his parents have made. That's not your problem to solve by changing who you are." As I lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of our neighborhood, sirens in the distance, music from a nearby apartment, the occasional car driving by, I thought about everything Diego had said. Was I holding our family back by sticking with work that marked us as immigrants, as people who hadn't made it in American society? What I didn't know was that within a few weeks, everything would change. The fruit cart that Diego was so ashamed of would become the reason our family was celebrated, and the work I did on the streets of Los Angeles would make me a local hero. Sometimes the things our children are most embarrassed about turn out to be the things that make us proudest of all. 3 weeks after our painful confrontation, I was working my usual Tuesday route through downtown Los Angeles when something unusual happened. I had just finished serving a regular customer near the Wells Fargo building, Mrs. Chen, who bought pineapple from me twice a week, when I noticed a young woman with a professional camera watching me work. She was Latina, probably in her late 20s, with press credentials hanging around her neck. As I finished cutting Mrs. Chen's pineapple into perfect spirals, arranging them in a cup with a small fork, the woman approached my cart. "Excuse me," she said in English, then switched to Spanish when she heard me talking to another customer. "Disculpe, señor. Soy periodista de Telemundo. Me llamo Sofía Ramírez. A journalist from Telemundo." I immediately felt nervous. In my experience, when reporters talked to street vendors, it was usually because someone was complaining about us, or because there was some kind of trouble. "¿En qué puedo ayudarla?" I asked, wiping my hands on the clean towel I always kept. "At my cart." "I've been watching you work for about 20 minutes, Sofía said, pulling out a small notebook. "I'm doing a story about small business owners in Los Angeles, and several people have mentioned you specifically as someone who provides exceptional service." "I don't understand. Mrs. Chen over there told me that you've been her fruit vendor for over 10 years. She says you remember exactly how she likes her fruit cut, that you always save the ripest pieces for her, and that you've never once charged her extra, even though she's very particular about her orders." I was surprised that Mrs. Chen had been talking about me to a reporter. She was always polite but formal, and I had no idea she had such a positive opinion of my service. "She also told me," Sofía continued, "that when her husband was sick last year and couldn't work for several months, you continued to give her fruit even when she couldn't pay, and that you never made her feel bad about it." That was true. Mr. Chen had been diagnosed with cancer, and I could see how stressed Mrs. Chen was about their medical bills. It seemed like such a small thing to give her fruit during those difficult months. She had been a loyal customer for years, and I knew she would pay me back when she could. "It was nothing," I said. "She's a good customer, a good person." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Sofía said, her eyes lighting up. "Can I ask you some questions about your business, about how long you've been doing this, what it means to you?" Over the next hour, as I continued serving customers, Sofía interviewed me about my life, my work, and my family. I told her about coming from El Salvador, about losing my factory job, about how the fruit cart had become not just a way to earn money, but a way to serve my community. "You know," I said as I handed a cup of perfectly diced mango to a businessman, who was clearly in a hurry, "people think selling fruit is simple work. But I've learned so much about this city, about people, about what it means to provide service." "What do you mean?" "Every customer is different. Mrs. Chen likes her pineapple cut in spirals, but Mr. Rodriguez, who works at the bank, prefers chunks. Mrs. Martinez has diabetes, so I always have sugar-free options for her. The construction workers need fruit that's easy to eat with one hand. It's like being a chef who specializes in making each person happy." Sofía was taking notes rapidly. "And you've been doing this for 15 years? "Yes. At first, I thought it would be temporary. But I realized that this work has dignity. I'm not asking anyone for handouts. I'm providing a service that people value. I'm running my own business." "Do you have family?" I hesitated, thinking about Diego's embarrassment. "Yes, a wife and a son. My wife Carmen works as a housekeeper, and my son Diego is about to graduate from high school. He's going to UCLA in the fall. He must be very proud of how hard you've worked to support his education." I didn't know how to answer that question honestly, without revealing Diego's shame, so I just smiled and said, "We've all worked hard as a family." Sofía interviewed several of my regular customers, and I was amazed by what they told her. They talked about how I remembered their preferences, how I always had the freshest fruit, how I had become a reliable part of their daily routines. One office worker said that buying fruit from me was the best part of her day because I always asked about her family and made her feel like she mattered. "You know what strikes me about Roberto?" Mrs. Chen told Sofía. "He treats his work like an art form. The way he cuts fruit, the way he arranges it, the care he takes with every customer. It's not just selling fruit, it's providing an experience." When Sofía finished her interviews, she asked if she could follow me for a few more days to get a complete picture of my business. I agreed, though I was still puzzled about why a television reporter would be interested in my fruit cart. Over the next week, Sophia documented my daily routine. Getting up at 4 a.m. to go to the wholesale market, carefully selecting the best fruit, setting up my cart, serving customers throughout the day, and keeping detailed records of my sales and expenses. She was particularly interested in the business side of what I did. Most people don't realize that street vendors are actually entrepreneurs, she explained as she watched me calculate my daily profits. You have to manage inventory, understand customer service, deal with city regulations, handle all your own accounting. It's a real business. That's what I try to tell people. This isn't just selling fruit, it's running a company. On Friday afternoon, Sophia told me that her story would air the following week. Roberto, I think you're going to be surprised by the response. Your story is inspiring. It's about the American dream, about hard work and dignity, about serving your community. That evening, I told Carmen about the interviews, though I didn't mention them to Diego. He had been avoiding me since our fight, spending most of his time at work or with friends, and I didn't want to risk another confrontation. A television story? Carmen was excited. Roberto, that's wonderful. Maybe people will finally understand what you really do. I hope so, but I'm nervous about it. What if they make me look foolish? You could never look foolish. You're hardworking, honest, and good at what you do. If this reporter really watched, you work, she'll show people the truth. The following Tuesday, Sophia called to tell me that the story would air that evening on the 6 p.m. news. She sounded excited, which made me feel more optimistic about how it would turn out. Roberto, I want you to know that this story turned out even better than I expected. The producers loved it, and they're thinking about nominating it for a local journalism award. That evening, Carmen and I sat in our small living room, nervously waiting for 6 p.m. Diego was at work and wouldn't be home until later, which was probably for the best. I wasn't sure how he would react to seeing his father featured on television as a street vendor. When the story began, I was shocked by what I saw on the screen. The reporter had created a beautiful portrait of my work, showing me carefully selecting fruit at the wholesale market, interacting with customers, taking pride in the quality of my service. The interviews with my customers were glowing testimonials about my character and work ethic. But the most surprising part was how Sophia had framed the story. She presented me not as a struggling immigrant selling fruit to survive, but as a successful small business owner who had built something meaningful in his community. Roberto Morales represents the best of American entrepreneurship, Sophia said, in her closing remarks. He saw an opportunity to serve his community, and he turned it into a thriving business that has been supporting his family and bringing joy to his customers for 15 years. Carmen was crying as the story ended. Roberto, you looked so professional, so successful. They showed the truth about what you do. As we sat there absorbing what we had just seen, I realized that Sophia had given me something I didn't even know I needed. Validation that my work had value beyond just paying the bills. She had shown the world that selling fruit from a cart could be a source of pride, not shame. What I didn't know was that Diego had seen the story too, and that everything was about to change between us in ways I never could have imagined. The next morning, I was up at my usual 4 a.m., preparing for another day of work. The television story had been nice, but I assumed it would be quickly forgotten as the news cycle moved on to other stories. I was wrong. My phone started ringing. At 5:30 a.m., just as I was loading my cart, it was Sophia from Telemundo. Roberto, have you checked social media this morning? I don't really use social media, I admitted. Why? The story about you has gone viral. It's been shared thousands of times on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. People are calling you the fruit vendor with the heart of gold and LA's most beloved entrepreneur. I didn't really understand what going viral meant, but Sophia's excitement was infectious. More importantly, she continued, I've been getting calls all morning from people who want to interview you. The Los Angeles Times wants to do a feature story, and Good Morning America is interested in having you on their show. Good Morning America? The national television show? Yes, Roberto, your story has touched something in people. They're inspired by your work ethic, your dedication to customer service, and the way you've built a business from nothing. As I made my way to my first corner of the day, I noticed something different. People were approaching my cart with cell phones, taking pictures, and asking if I was the fruit vendor from the news. Several customers told me they had seen the story and wanted to support my business. By lunchtime, the crowd around my cart was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Office workers who had never bought fruit from me before were lining up to meet the celebrity fruit vendor. Social media influencers were posting videos of themselves buying fruit from my cart and talking about the importance of supporting small businesses. But the most surprising moment came around 2 p.m. when I looked up from cutting a watermelon and saw Diego standing at the edge of the crowd around my cart. He was still wearing his Starbucks uniform, which meant he had come directly from work. Our eyes met across the crowd, and I could see something in his expression that I hadn't seen in years. Something that looked like pride mixed with amazement. Diego waited until the crowd thinned out before approaching my cart. When he finally walked over, he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, watching me work, as if he was seeing me for the first time. "Dad," he finally said, his voice quiet enough that only I could hear. "I saw the news story last night." "Oh, all. My friends at school saw it too, and my co-workers at Starbucks. Everyone's been talking about it." I braced myself for another lecture about embarrassment, but Diego's tone was different this time. "I had no idea," he continued. "I mean, I knew you worked hard, but I never understood. I never saw what you really do." "Diego, it's the same work I've always done." "No, it's not. I mean, yes, you're selling fruit, but watching that story, hearing what your customers said about you. Dad, you're not just a fruit vendor. You're like a neighborhood institution. These people don't just buy fruit from you. They depend on you. You're part of their lives." I could see Diego struggling with emotions he didn't quite know how to express. "Mrs. Chen from the story? She came into Starbucks this morning specifically to tell me how proud I should be of you. She said you've been like family to her for years, that you helped her through the hardest time in her life when her husband was sick. She's a good customer. Dad, she said you gave her free fruit for months and never made her feel like charity. She said you have the biggest heart of anyone she knows." Diego looked around at the area where I worked every day. The busy intersection, the office buildings, the flow of people who had become part of my daily routine. "I always thought this was just temporary. Like you were waiting for something. Better to come along. But this is your business, isn't it? You built this." "Diego, I tried to tell you. I know you did. But I wasn't listening. I was so worried about what other people would think that I never really looked at what you were accomplishing." That afternoon, Diego stayed with me for the rest of my workday. He watched me interact with customers, saw how I remembered everyone's preferences, observed the way people lit up when they saw me coming down the street. He helped me clean the cart and count the day's earnings. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you like this work? I mean, really like it, not just tolerate it?" I thought about his question carefully. "Diego, when I first started selling fruit, I thought it was beneath me. I was embarrassed that a man with my skills and experience was reduced to pushing a cart on the street. What changed? I learned that there's no such thing as work that's beneath you if you do it with dignity and purpose. I learned that serving people, making them happy, being a positive part of their day, that's meaningful work, regardless of what form it takes." The woman on TV said, "You're an entrepreneur." I am. I buy inventory, I manage costs, I provide customer service, I build relationships. The fact that my office is a street corner doesn't make it less real. That evening, Diego came home with a completely different attitude than I had seen from him in years. He told Carmen about spending the afternoon with me, about seeing my work through new eyes. Mom, did you know that Dad has customers who have been buying fruit from him for over 10 years? Did you know that people plan their routes to work around where his cart will be? Carmen smiled. Yes, mijo. I've always known that your father is special at what he does. Why didn't you ever tell me? We tried to. But you weren't ready to hear it. Over dinner, Diego asked me hundreds of questions about my business. He wanted to know about profit margins, customer retention, seasonal variations in fruit prices, expansion possibilities. Dad, have you ever thought about having multiple carts? Or maybe opening a fruit stand? Sometimes. But this business is about relationships. I don't know if it would work the same way if I weren't the one serving the customers directly. What about partnering with local restaurants or offering catering services? There might be ways to grow the business while keeping the personal touch. I was amazed by Diego's business thinking. This was the boy who had been embarrassed by my work just weeks ago, now brainstorming ways to expand it. Diego, I appreciate your interest. But why the sudden change? He was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling to find the right words. Dad, I was ashamed of something I didn't understand. I thought selling fruit from a cart meant you had failed at something else. But what I saw today is that you chose this work and made it successful. You built something from nothing, and you did it with integrity. He paused, looking directly at me with an expression of respect I hadn't seen since he was a child. I want to be like you when I grow up. Not necessarily selling fruit, but having the courage to do work that matters, regardless of what other people think about it. That night, as Carmen and I prepared for bed, she took my hand and smiled. Roberto, did you hear what your son said tonight? Which part? He said he wants to be like you when he grows up. Do you know how long I've been waiting for him to realize what kind of man his father is? As I fell asleep that night, I thought about the strange journey that had led us to this moment. The television story had given me external validation for my work, but more importantly, it had opened Diego's eyes to see his father clearly for the first time in years. Sometimes our children need to hear the truth about us from strangers before they can recognize the value of what we do every day. Sometimes it takes the outside world celebrating our work before our own families understand that there was never anything to be ashamed of in the first place. 6 months after the Telemundo story aired, I was featured in Los Angeles Magazine as one of the city's most inspiring entrepreneurs. The article included a photo of me at my cart, smiling as I served a customer with the downtown LA skyline in the background. But the most meaningful part of the photo was Diego standing next to me, wearing a UCLA t-shirt and helping me arrange fruit in perfectly organized displays. The magazine article came out during Diego's first semester at UCLA, where he was studying business with a focus on entrepreneurship. He had changed his major from pre-med after our reconciliation, saying he wanted to learn how to build businesses that served communities the way mine did. Dad, he told me when the magazine came out, I want you to know that when people at UCLA ask about my family, I tell them my father is a successful entrepreneur who built a business from nothing and became a pillar of his community. And how? Do they react? They're impressed, especially when I explain the business model, the customer retention rates, the profit margins. My business professors use your cart as an example of effective small business management. The transformation in Diego's attitude had been gradual but complete. After seeing the television story, he began spending more time with me, learning about the business side of what I did. He helped me develop a simple inventory tracking system, suggested ways to optimize my routes for maximum efficiency, and even created a basic social media presence that brought new customers to the cart. But, more importantly, he had begun to understand the deeper meaning of what I did every day. You know what I realized? He said one afternoon, as we worked together to prep fruit for the next day. Your work is about so much more than selling fruit. You're providing a service that makes people's lives better. Mrs. Chen told me that buying fruit from you is the best part of her day, because you always ask about her grandchildren and remember their names. Customer service is important in any business. But it's more than that. You've created this network of relationships throughout downtown LA. You know hundreds of people, you're part of their daily routines, you've watched their kids grow up. That's not just business, that's community building. The national attention from the original story had indeed led to other opportunities. I was interviewed on Good Morning America, featured in a Wall Street Journal article about immigrant entrepreneurs, and invited to speak at a conference about small business success. But perhaps the most unexpected recognition came when the Los Angeles City Council proclaimed October 15th as Roberto Morales Day in honor of my contribution to the city's small business community. Roberto Morales represents the best of what makes Los Angeles great, Councilwoman Martinez said at the ceremony. He's an immigrant who came here with nothing and built a successful business through hard work, integrity, and dedication to serving his community. Diego was in the audience that day, beaming with pride as I received a proclamation from the Jose City. Afterward, he introduced me to several of his UCLA classmates who had come to the ceremony. "This is my dad," he said to each of them. "He's the entrepreneur I told you about, the one who built a business from a single fruit cart and turned it into a community institution." The young people were genuinely impressed, asking thoughtful questions about customer acquisition, inventory management, and scaling strategies. They treated me like a business expert, not like a street vendor who had gotten lucky with some media attention. Mr. Morales, one of Diego's classmates, said, "I'm writing my senior thesis on immigrant entrepreneurship. Would you be willing to be interviewed for my research?" "Of course. But I should tell you, I don't have a business degree or formal training." That's exactly why your story is valuable. You've succeeded through practical experience and intuition. That's actually much more impressive than following a textbook. As we drove home from the ceremony, Diego was unusually quiet. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. "I'm thinking about how stupid I was. All those years I was embarrassed by the one thing about our family that I should have been most proud of. Diego, you were young. Young people sometimes have different ideas about what success looks like. But it wasn't just that I was young. I was prejudiced against my own father because his work didn't fit my narrow idea of what respectable employment looked like." Diego pulled into our driveway and turned off the car, but neither of us got out immediately. "Dad, can I tell you something that I've never told you before?" "Of course." When I was a sophomore in high school, there was this career day where parents came to talk about their jobs. I never invited you because I was embarrassed about the fruit cart. I remember. You said the timing didn't work out. I lied. I was ashamed to have my classmates see you. But you know what happened instead? This kid named Marcus brought his dad, who was a janitor at Sony Studios. Mr. Williams talked about his work with such pride, explaining how he was part of the team that kept a major entertainment company running smoothly. That sounds like important work? It was, and all the kids were impressed by his pride in what he did and his knowledge of the industry. After his presentation, I realized that the problem wasn't what parents did for work. It was how they felt about it and how their kids talked about it. Diego looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Dad, if I had invited you to Career Day, and if you had talked about your business the way you talk about it now, with pride and expertise, my classmates would have been impressed. The shame wasn't in what you do. The shame was in my attitude about it. Diego, you've learned that lesson now. That's what matters. I want to make it up to you, not just with words, but with actions." Over the following months, Diego did exactly that. He began working with me during school breaks, learning every aspect of the business from wholesale purchasing to customer service. He created a business plan for potential expansion, developed marketing strategies, and even helped me secure a small business loan to purchase a second cart. But the most meaningful change was in how Diego talked about our family. When he brought his girlfriend home to meet us, he introduced me by saying, "This is my father, Roberto. He's built one of the most successful fruit businesses in downtown LA." Your son talks about you all the time, she told me. He says you're his business mentor and that everything he's learning about entrepreneurship, he learned from watching you work. Last month, Diego graduated from UCLA with honors. At his graduation party, he asked to make a speech in front of our family and friends. I want to talk about my father, he began, looking directly at me. For too many years, I was embarrassed by his work, by the fact that he sold fruit from a cart on the streets of Los Angeles. I thought success meant having an office job, wearing a suit, having a title that impressed people. The room was completely quiet as Diego continued. But my father taught me that real success is about integrity, hard work, and service to others. He built a business from nothing, supported his family with dignity, and became a respected member of his community. He did all of this while facing discrimination, language barriers, and the judgment of people like me who didn't understand the value of what he was doing. Diego's voice became stronger as he reached his conclusion. Today, I graduate from UCLA with a business degree. But the most important business lessons I learned didn't come from textbooks or professors. They came from watching my father treat every customer with respect, take pride in the quality of his work, and never give up on his dreams, even when his own son was ashamed of him. He raised his glass. To Roberto Morales, the best businessman and the best father I know. As everyone in the room raised their glasses and toasted, I felt a completeness I hadn't experienced in years. The son who had once been embarrassed by my work was now prouder of me than I had ever imagined possible. Today, Diego works part-time managing the business side of our expanded fruit operation while pursuing his MBA. He talks about eventually franchising the concept, creating a network of high-quality fruit vendors throughout Los Angeles. Dad, you've built something that could change how people think about street vending, he told me recently. You've proven that you can provide excellent service, build customer loyalty, and run a profitable business, all while working from a cart on the street corner. And what's your role in all this? My role is to help you grow what you've built and to make sure that everyone understands what you've accomplished. I want the whole world to know that Roberto Morales didn't just sell fruit. He created a model for dignified, successful entrepreneurship. Sometimes our children need to see us through the eyes of strangers before they can appreciate what we've been doing for them all along. Sometimes it takes the outside world celebrating our work before our own families recognize that there was never anything to be ashamed of in the first place. The fruit cart that once embarrassed my son is now the foundation of our family's pride and our shared future. And the work I do on the streets of Los Angeles has become the inspiration for the next generation of entrepreneurs in our family. But the most incredible moment came last month, when Diego made an announcement that took my breath away. Dad, I've been accepted to the graduate business program at Stanford, he said over dinner, but I've decided not to go. Carmen and I both looked at him in shock. Stanford was one of the most prestigious business schools in the country. Diego, why would you turn down Stanford? Carmen asked. Because I want to stay here and work with Dad full-time. I want to build something together that we can both be proud of. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Mijo, you can't give up that opportunity. For me, I'm not giving it up for you, Dad. I'm choosing something better. Stanford will teach me theories about business. Working with you will teach me how to build something real, something that matters to people. Diego pulled out a folder filled with business plans and financial projections. I've been working on this for months. I want us to create the Morales Fresh Fruit Company, a network of premium fruit carts throughout Los Angeles, each one operated by immigrant entrepreneurs who will train and support. You want to franchise the business? Not exactly franchise. I want to create a cooperative where we provide the carts, the training, the wholesale purchasing power, and the marketing support. The vendors keep the majority of the profits, but we all succeed together. Carmen was crying now, seeing her son's vision for honoring his father's work while building something even bigger. There's more, Diego continued. I've already talked to 3 other immigrant families who want to participate. and I've lined up initial funding from a community development bank that specializes in supporting minority-owned businesses. Diego: "This is incredible, but, Dad, let me finish. The best part is that we're going to call each cart location Roberto's Corner, named after you. Every vendor will be trained in your customer service standards, your quality control methods, your business philosophy." I was speechless. My son wanted to take the work I had been ashamed to have him see and turn it into a legacy that would help other families achieve their dreams. "There's one more thing," Diego said, his voice getting emotional. "I want you to be the CEO of the company. Not me, you. This is your vision, your expertise, your reputation. I'll be the operations manager, but you'll be the leader." 6 months later, we opened our 5th Roberto's Corner location. Each cart is operated by a different immigrant family, all of whom have been trained in the Morales method of customer service and quality control. The business has been featured in national magazines as an innovative model for community-based entrepreneurship. But the moment that made everything worthwhile came last week during the grand opening of our newest location in Santa Monica. Diego was giving a speech to the crowd of customers, city officials, and media representatives who had gathered for the ceremony. "5 years ago," he said into the microphone, "I was embarrassed by my father's work. I thought selling fruit from a cart was something to be ashamed of. Today, I'm standing here as the operations manager of a company built on his vision, his values, and his example." Diego gestured toward me, standing proudly next to our newest cart. Roberto Morales didn't just build a business. He built a model for how immigrants can achieve success with dignity, integrity, and service to their communities. Every family in our cooperative is living proof that the American dream is still alive, and that sometimes the most important work happens not in boardrooms, but on street corners where people take care of each other. The crowd applauded, but Diego wasn't finished. "Dad, will you come up here, please?" As I walked to the microphone, Diego put his arm around my shoulders. "I want everyone to know," he said, "that my father is my business partner, my mentor, and my hero. The fruit cart that I once thought was holding our family back has actually lifted us higher than I ever imagined possible." Diego turned to me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for never giving up on your work, even when I gave up on appreciating it. Thank you for showing me that success isn't about what other people think of your job. It's about the pride you take in doing it well." As I looked out at the crowd, customers, city officials, other vendor families, journalists, I realized that the shame Diego had once felt about my work had been transformed into something beautiful. The fruit cart that had once embarrassed him was now the foundation of a business that was changing lives throughout Los Angeles. "When I started selling fruit 20 years ago," I said into the microphone, "I thought I was just trying to support my family. I never imagined that this work would become something my son wanted to build his career around, or that it would help other families achieve their dreams." I looked directly at Diego. Sometimes our children teach us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn. My son taught me that the work we do has value far beyond what we can see, and that when we take pride in what we do, others will learn to take pride in it too. Today, the Morales Fresh Fruit Company employs 15 families and serves customers throughout Los Angeles County. Diego has been accepted to speak at business conferences about immigrant entrepreneurship, and we've been approached by cities in other states who want to replicate our cooperative model. But the real success isn't measured in revenue or recognition. It's measured in the fact that my son, who once couldn't bring himself to acknowledge my work, now introduces himself by saying, "I'm Diego Morales, and I'm proud to be in the fruit business with my father." The cart that once brought shame to our family has become the source of our greatest pride, and the work that my son once thought was beneath us has lifted us higher than either of us ever dreamed possible.